Hello, everyone, whoever has just joined. I'll wait for a few minutes to allow other people also to join. And so please stay there. Don't go. And we'll start in a few minutes. So, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And hope you had a good week. So I'll be starting in a few minutes. Just waiting for people to join. In the meantime, I just wanted to know if you had a chance to go through the practice questions I shared last week and the course material for week 2. And if you have any doubts in that, like, did you guys get access to the folder with all the handouts and the notes from the class, like the practice questions and everything that I shared in the class?
Ma'am, where were they uploaded?
So that is shared by the NPTEL team, the link to the YouTube video and the
On mail? Is it on mail?
supposed to be shared in email, but I'm not sure if you. That's why I'm asking.
No, actually, we did not receive the previous session that we had on Saturday. We haven't received.
Okay, so let me share that with you. For now, I'll just share it with you in that window. But you should have actually received it. I mean, I'm not sure why they have not sent it.
Is there anyone else who has received it? Because I haven't.
It's a general email which goes out to everybody. So if you're getting emails from NPTEL in general, like other emails, then this should also have been. But I'm not sure. I mean, maybe this is the first one, so like the first assignment. So there.
So other emails I'm getting.
Yeah, then it's possible that they have not sent the email at all. So last week's YouTube video is linked here, and just shared the Google Drive folder for the entire course. So there are week-wise folders in this. I'm just sharing the whole folder with you. You can just bookmark it for the future. I don't know why you're not getting the emails. I mean, as in, I don't know why they're not sending the email, but maybe they're trying to sort something out for that was like the first week. So please check if you're being able to access the folder, because this is where I'm uploading the questions and the handouts and things. So the other course materials, I think you have access to through the NPTEL system itself, right? The like the course book and the lecture notes and all that you have access to already.
Yes, we get mails for that.
It's there on the system that I can see, but the live session videos and the Google Drive folders also they will be sharing, but it's not yet.
Okay, but currently it's not there, but yeah, the link that you shared.
Yeah, I mean they will be sharing that. They share it with you guys. So okay, so you can bookmark this folder. So then if you didn't get the email, then you would not have had a chance to go through it. But you can take a look at them now and let me know if you have any questions. And also for the week 2 content, which is there on the system. So were you able to like cover the whole week 2 content?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'll be starting shortly. I'm guessing, hoping like more people will join because a lot of people join late. But in that week 2 content and the practice questions, if you have any questions, you can share with me now. You can type into the chat box or you can unmute and speak, whichever you like.
Are we going to revise the week 2 session today, like all the videos?
So what I'll do is I will, like I was doing previously. So if you have any questions already, I will take that up. Otherwise, like in the sense, questions as in not questions, but if there's some concept you want clarified, or if something is not very, you're not very comfortable with some idea or some part of the course, you can tell me that. So I will, I will go over it. Otherwise, what I will do is I'll share the practice problem set for week 2, which is separate from whatever assignments you guys have. And we can discuss the different concepts which are covered in that part as we go.
I had a question in the PSS model, innovation model that we had. So the PSS model says that the idea shifts from consumption of ownership to consumption of access and sharing. So are the rickshaws, which comes under green design, the CNG one, and all the public transport that we have, do they come under PSS model?
It's like, I don't think they're designed with that philosophy in mind. So one thing, I mean, I'll come to it a little bit in more detail when we start talking. But to some extent, you can say yes. But what I would say is it's not like a very thoughtful design per se in that sense. To some extent, yes, they have tried to like, club users together, for example, or, change the type of fuel you're using in a vehicle. It is still not a completely holistic approach because see, even in a what you're saying is the bus design, right? If you're using public transport. So public transport is available as just another form of transport. That's a service which the government or the even private agencies they provide anyway to the users.
Correct.
It's not in that sense, it's not designed per se as a product service system. So it may be a product and a service, but it's not entirely designed as a system. It works with that particular view in mind. To some extent, yes, it makes the whole thing more sustainable because you're clubbing users together in a bus. So you're reducing the number of vehicles, the per capita emissions will go down, things like that. So let me just take a few more minutes and I'll come back to your question when I'm discussing some basic fundamentals for these remaining design methodologies. Okay, so I'm just going to mute myself for a few minutes and I'll just, in a few minutes, I'll pull up the next question set and also like maybe a little bit of, revision of what we did last time, very short recap. And then we'll move forward. Right? Okay. So let's see. I don't know if other people are joining, but let's see if they are. Okay. So it is 3:11 now. I'm not sure if other people are joining, but I'm going to start anyway. So just as a recap, just for context about where we were and what we were studying. So in the previous week, we studied some basic ideas and some basic understanding of what is sustainability in the first place. And what can we call as sustainable, what can we call as not sustainable, and why we can only measure or describe sustainability in a comparative way, that this is more sustainable, this is less sustainable. We can't say that anything is absolutely sustainable. That is yet that that state of sustainability we are yet to achieve. Then we went over what are natural resources, they are renewable or non-renewable, what is the meaning of non-renewable, and we discussed cradle to cradle design in brief, not in a whole lot of depth, but we did cover cradle to cradle design methodology. And then we went to systems thinking. So the last part where I concluded was explaining what is a system and why do we need systems thinking for design in the first place, because we have so many design methodologies. So why do you need to use systems thinking now? There's a very specific, very solid reason of why systems thinking, which is a wider field of working. So systems thinking is a framework which can be applied to any field. It's not specific only to design. It's applicable in business organization, in sorry, in electronics, in human machine interaction, in many ways, in many fields. Systems thinking has been used for decades already. Now designers have only sort of recently started waking up to systems thinking in the last decade or 2 decades or so. And that is because problems of sustainability are becoming more and more complex. And we realize that products fit into a system, and product service systems themselves are systems. So we can't take a part by part approach to a problem. We need to approach it as a whole. And when we try to zoom out and see the product and how it fits into the whole, we need to consider it as a system. So that is where we were when we ended in the previous week. And then this is a definition of sustainability, which we finally agreed upon to use simpler version. There was a more complex version, but a simpler version. I just kept it here for reference because we may want to come back. So now in this week, what we will be covering is the timeline of sustainability and how it kind of correlates with how different types of design methodologies evolved over a period of time. So I kind of summarized it in a very compressed way in this one slide, what I think is covered in your lecture in one lecture. So I think this is a very brief summary of it. Just to recap this, because I don't want to repeat what is in the lecture already, but I'll just go over this because I will come back to this when I'm trying to map the evolution of design itself. And for that, it's kind of important to know where the world was when designers were attempting this or when designers were attempting that. So in the course material which we are studying, we start in the 1970s in terms of international debates, studies. And at least for your coursework, you need to stick to that. But just for context, environmentalism itself has been around for more than a century and a half. So environmentalism debates and discussions actually started in the late 19th century itself. That's when the nationalization of national parks and conservation of wildlife species, etc., started in the United States. And then in the 1950s in UK and even in US and EU, some acts and legislations were passed to sort of protect the environment. Like there's a Clean Air Act in the UK in the 1950s, similar acts in the US, and then again similar legislation in the EU. So environmentalism is not new, is what I'm trying to say. And that is very, very important to understand. So we may focus on 1970s onwards because that is kind of more relevant with what we are doing. But environmentalism as a philosophy, as a field, as legislation has been around since, since we have started industrializing itself. So 70s is when like really heated debates and studies started happening. People started writing about it. In 80s, you had the Brundtland Commission, which gave the like definition of sustainable development. So until then, we were just talking, just talking. We didn't actually have any definition to even agree upon. What are we even calling as sustainable? What do we want to sustain? What are we fighting for? So the definition of the Brundtland Commission basically gave a very basic rudimentary approach, starting point for what is sustainable development. Then in the 90s, you had a whole lot of developments from there, which grew in the Brundtland Commission report. You had the first Earth Summit, and then there was an environmental action program of the European Commission. So this was the fifth one, which means it had been continuing since before. But the most important was the Kyoto Protocol. Because the Kyoto Protocol, I'm not sure if it is covered in your lectures again, but just for your understanding, Kyoto Protocol was, I think in 1997, if I'm not mistaken. Kyoto Protocol was the first, planned way in which all the countries of the world came together and decided to limit their emissions to a certain, figure. And the countries of the world were divided in Annex A and Annex B, which was basically the developed countries and the developing countries. And there was like a difference in the criteria in the number of limitations on emissions for Annex A and Annex B countries. That's like very one-line summary of the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol is basically the starting of whatever we want to define as SDGs and Paris Climate Agreement. All of those actually started with the Kyoto Protocol. So the Kyoto Protocol took a long time to come into effect because the countries had to ratify their commitments. They had to like sign on the dotted line, basically, right? So it came into effect, I think, only in 2005 or something, or maybe 2000. 2005, I think it came into effect. I have not put the date here, but from what I remember. So in the 2000s, you had the first actual step forward where you had a sustainable development strategy defined by EU, and the Kyoto Protocol comes into effect. So, the world is actually taking action. From discussion and debate, we are actually moving towards action in the 2000s, right? And in 2010s, we actually started, crystallizing and further defining those actions a lot more. So there is the Doha Amendment to the Kyoto Protocol in I think 2012. Then there is, of course, the most important Paris Climate Agreement in 2015, and the 17 SDGs as defined by the UN. All of this has happened in 2010s. So you can imagine this is not very old, not more than say 10 to 15 years ago. Right? So this kind of structure, which we have been kind of working on or working with in sustainable design, is fairly recent. Because unless you have that bigger structure, bigger framework, even designers cannot really give structure to their methods, to their methodologies, right? So this whole development happened in the 2010s, and in 2020s, this like further expansion of all of these, where corporates are coming forward, and there's a whole lot of discussion on limiting the emissions further, and there's a lot of international trading, all that going on. There's nothing significant that I can talk about. You have like the COP agreements, the COP summits every year. So this is just further expansion of basically all these developments. So is that making sense? I mean, I don't want to bore you, but this was just important to understand where the world was at a given point of time vis-a-vis environmentalism and sustainability. So these are the 17 SDGs in case you have never seen them before. So as you can see that, when we talk about sustainability, we talk about environment, economics, and, the social aspect of it. So you can see that all these 17 pertain to one or the other of these three aspects of sustainability. So what we have done is we have taken these 17 and we have kind of reduced to those three. You can look at it in that way also. That instead of sitting with 17 all the time, you've kind of put all of these in one or the other of these three categories. And it is a very, it's a decent enough classification. So, all right. So, what we'll talk about now is a little bit further in terms of the design for sustainability discussion. So let's stop here. And let me share something else. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
So these are the practice questions for this week. I will upload them in the same folder link which I have shared with you. So instead of just telling you how the DfS, Design for Sustainability, is shortened into D4S or DfS, so we can just also look at it as a question and see which one you think makes the most sense. So how do you think the design for sustainability process evolved over the decades? Which answer do you think is correct? And like, what do you think? Why do you think that is correct? You can just read the question for a few minutes. I'll give you a few minutes to read the question.
The second one.
Okay. Aparna, I think Aparna is also on the call. I just want to hear from everybody. There's nothing wrong with answering anything in the class, even if it's not the so-called correct answer. So the way I'm trying to teach these PA lessons is that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time studying the subject separately for your exams and assignments. So whatever we discuss in the class and whatever questions we solve in the class, concepts we discuss in the class, should be more or less enough for you to finish your assignment and your exam. That's at least my attempt. If there's anything else you want me to discuss or you want me to add to the teaching pattern, I'm happy to consider that. But at least I'm trying to design it in a way that you don't have to spend a whole lot of time outside of these 2 hours on this course. Like whatever you do in the coursework in those lectures is of course there, but you don't have to spend too much time other than just watching the videos and doing this TA class. Aparna, are you there? You can type in the chat window or you can unmute yourself, whatever you prefer. don't know if she's there. All right. So, Siddhi, why do you think it's the second B answer?
Because firstly, it was in the I've studied the lectures made. There was this
Give me a moment. Just
hierarchy.
I think Aparna is still reading the question. So I'll just mute myself for a minute. And once she has answered, then we'll discuss the answer.
Sure.
Okay, so Aparna is saying it is B. So Aparna, would you like to share why you think it is B?
Am I audible?
Yeah, why do you think it is B?
I think because first, when we find out the damages being caused, when we identify the damages, then we can intervene in that. Then we go back a step and find like where we went wrong in the process, and then we would go where we went wrong in the product itself. uh, Maybe that.
Okay. Siddhi, what did you think why it is B?
Yeah, more or less the same thing. Like when we start designing any product or it is out in the market, after its usage or after its life cycle is over, we understand that what the how the product has been ended up. Where is it? Has it ended up? Is it still with the consumer, or is it damaging the environment? So that could be, because that will be the first step, and then slowly we realize that we need to intervene in the process itself to use cleaner technologies. uh, and then we need to understand that are the products and services even needed in the market? Is there a need for those products and services? And when we go into that, we understand that when the behavioral patterns of the consumers change, we won't have to design products and services that are harming the environment and not even of great use to the consumer.
Right. Okay, so I'll just share a screen with can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm just trying to figure out the best way to explain this, which is something I want to try. There is a certain type of pen which does this thing. I don't know why it's not working. Okay, anyway, never mind. Never mind. Sorry, yes. So say suppose this is like, the space in which you are releasing a product. And this is your product. And it's giving out some emissions. And there are a lot of, there's a lot of green cover here. A lot of green cover here which is getting damaged. And there are people who are using the products, who are using this product. This is a conceptual sketch, not an actual thing. And what happens is that when you use this product, you form a habit. So, there's a repetition in the usage of the product. Right? Something like that. So what happens that when you first start using a product, you discover, like you were saying, that it is causing some damage. We're talking about the timeline, right? The timeline of evolution of design. So it's not where we are right now. That is the part I wanted to clarify. So historically, when designers first started thinking about, including sustainability in their designs and all that, what happened was they first just realized that there are products like this and they're causing damage. So what they did, say suppose this product has, so many different materials, different parts inside it. So what they started doing was they started, removing parts of it. Like, you remove some toxic materials or you remove something that's not recyclable, and instead you include some green, practices, something like adding biodegradable materials or adding materials which do not give out emissions. So that is sort of similar to what we do in green design, right? Is that making sense? I just wanted to connect this question to what we are studying as evolution of design, processes. So that is sort of what we do in green design, which is that, we saw the damage caused by the product, and then we fixed the materials of the product. And say suppose this product is coming from, through a channel. So this is a channel, right? It's not happening in a silo. It's coming through a channel. So these are some type of, product processes which are leading to this product. Now, when we start moving towards sustainability, we change these processes. So we cross these out and we change it to something else. Right? We try some other process and we do some other greener processes of manufacturing. So both these things are actually part of green design. That's like how we started thinking about evolution of design. Then the next stage is what we are starting to move a little bit more in the bigger picture. We're starting to think a little bit more about, not just where the products come from or just where the products go, but the entire life cycle of the product. While you're using the product, what is happening? What happens after it uses the product? But in a bigger picture, right? So I'm just trying to make you understand the difference between green design and eco design. From green design, in which you're just eliminating one part of the product or changing some process of manufacturing of the product. Eco design, what we do is we say we define this particular product as a whole. This is suppose I define this product as a whole. This whole product as a whole. Okay, this is We look at the whole thing. We're not looking at parts inside it. We're not looking at the processes inside it. And we make one bigger circle in which we define the area of impact of the product, which means the processes it comes from, the places where it goes, how it is used, the three parts of life cycle, right? Birth, life, and death, as we say, or in this case, instead of death, we are talking about next life, or how the product, what happens to the product when it becomes junk, when it becomes trash. So now what we are doing is we're trying to move more and more towards that entire life cycle of the product, right? So that is eco design, right? But at the same time, there's a big, you should understand there's a big overlap in the many of the design principles in all of these processes. So green design and eco design have some parts which are overlapping. Eco design, cradle to cradle design have some parts which are overlapping. Cradle to cradle eco design and product service system have some parts which are overlapping, and that is mainly because they're all trying to solve the same problem, right? So when you look at the final product, you can't immediately tell which design approach was used because it's a methodology. The design methodology is a way of thinking, is a way of approaching the problem. In the end, the next result you will get in all of these processes will be a more sustainable product, right? Am I making things clearer, or is this confusing you guys more?
No, it's getting clear.
Right? Okay. So this is how we move forward, which is why there's no the different design methodologies, they're not mutually exclusive, not just in philosophy, but even the way they developed over a period of time is, there's a very, I'll show the timeline in a minute, but the way they developed over a period of time is also like overlap. There's an overlap. There were some people who were working on, say, cradle to cradle at the same time, and some other people who were working on life cycle eco design. At the same time, some other people had started to think about emotionally durable design. So all of these design approaches are not mutually exclusive. And secondly, they are all overlapping even in timelines. And that is why sometimes, when you look at a product, it's not that simple to say which design approach was used, because they are all sort of similar. But what is important to understand is what are the defining characteristics of each approach. In the end, with each approach, you will get a product which is more sustainable than what you would get if you don't use any of them. Now, principles are very different. I mean, some principles are similar. You come back to the same things like recycling, reusing, all of that is going to be sort of common in all the principles. But the more defining characteristics are what you need to remember between all these approaches. And none of them is redundant. That's what I'm trying to say. That none of these approaches has become redundant. It's not like nobody uses green design anymore. It's not like nobody uses eco design anymore. No, they're still very much here. People still use it. Even you guys might be using it in your own lives without realizing that you're using these design principles or you're doing something like this. So none of these principles are, obsolete. That's what I'm trying to say. That even though we are discussing it as evolution over a period of time and how design has evolved from green design to systemic design or spatio-technical design, but at the same time, just because we have reached the level of spatio-technical design does not mean that green design is obsolete or something. It's not obsolete. There are still people around you in businesses, everywhere else, who are still using it. Right? So now, after eco design, say suppose I talk about cradle to cradle design. So in cradle to cradle design also, they are using similar principles, but it's again not as holistic as eco design. In cradle to cradle design, we studied last time that they try to put the biological matter in the biological cycle, right? There's one cycle, the technical, or the non-biodegradable matter in a different cycle, in the technological cycle. So they are just, sort of looking at it in a different perspective. That's all. We're trying to do the similar thing in eco design, but again in a much more bigger perspective sort of way. Cradle to cradle design has just achieved something more in the sense that they have developed a framework for certification of products. That is a unique thing about Cradle design, that they actually found a way to, we created a very strict, a very clear cut, guidelines and framework, so that people can actually use those guides. Very formalized. If you look at, it's there on their website. I don't know if any of you guys have seen the website of Cradle design, but they have formalized the whole technique, the methods, everything, specifications for certification of products as Cradle to Cradle certified. And that kind of helps incentivize products to some extent, and also helps designers leverage the fact that the product is more sustainable. So it's like, it's a much easier structure to work with, right? Now, after that, we'll come to other principles of design, but I just wanted to share this one for now. So you understand how we are moving from, intervention after the product use, intervention in process, then intervention in something else, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Let's go back to the question. So, yeah, both of you were correct. Intervention after process cause damages, intervention in the process, then in the products and services themselves, like where we are moving more towards product and service design, and then intervention in consumption patterns, which is what we will come to when we talk about design for behavioral change. That is one of the design approaches we studied. So that is one of the ways in which we actually approach design. Is this part clear?
Yeah.
Okay, I took some time on this one question, but I thought it might help get some clarity on whether connecting all the design approaches sort of together. Okay, so now I think the next question would be very easy for you guys. The next question is, what is the role of design in sustainability? Like, how it has expanded over the decades. So similar to what we just discussed. So why don't you just type in your answer in the chat, and then we can move forward. You can just type A, B, C, D, whatever you think is the correct answer for question 2 in the chat. Then once everybody has answered, I will move forward. Yes, he has answered. Others? Is the question clear? Is the question clear? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. It's okay. You can answer whatever you think is correct. Then we'll discuss why it is correct or incorrect. So just for your understanding or for your reference, I may be sharing something which are a bit extra from whatever is there in the lecture notes. That's just because that's when I remember things and I tell you those things and things like that. But at least for your exams and your assignments, if you think I've taught you something extra and it's helpful, that's great. But otherwise, just you stick to the formal syllabus for the course. Like, I know not everybody is here to write the exam alone. Some people just want to understand the subject better, which is why I share a little bit more than what is in the syllabus. But if there's no need to feel overwhelmed, is what I'm trying to say. Like you might feel a bit overwhelmed that I'm also sharing handouts and video and there's already video. It's not to overwhelm you, it's just to help you. So if you don't have enough time to do all the course materials, you can just follow whatever is there in the lecture, because what you get in the exam will be from the course materials on NPTEL, the lectures. Okay, so Aparna and Rajendra have answered. Okay, so Aparna, why do you think it is B? Sorry, C. You said C, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Because in sustainability, like it has moved from looking at parts to understanding that everything around the product or say product affects the sustainability level. And as we were discussing, there is nothing absolute sustainability. It's always comparative. So everything affects. So it is more about the system and everything around it.
Okay. Rajendra, why do you think it's B? If you are there, can you just continue?
Ma'am, as per current ESG protocol, means social concepts is also added in the sustainability. So I select that option B.
Why do you
But I think option C is more appropriate. Life cycle perspective of the product is. I think I have read that.
properly?
Yeah.
See the question, that's last time also I said this, read the question properly.
Yeah.
Just check all correct answers.
Okay.
So yeah, Siddhi, why do you think it's all of the above?
Because when we went to the previous question, it was the perspective has changed from intervention in the after damage caused and then to the consumption patterns, right? So from remedial actions to prevention, it has changed that drastically. So B would be human element has been added to this process, like the human quality of life or our social cultural approaches to our life are important in the design process. So that has also evolved. Our approach has evolved from only product to the whole product life cycle. Fourth, also because we have changed from altering materials to changing the production processes. Yeah, it's similar to like the first one that we've
Exactly. That's
using
kind
cleaner
of what,
technologies.
it's just a different way of looking at the same question, actually. That we are just, the first question is like the more formal language, but in the second question, we just try to address some of the other parts of design for sustainability, which we have gone on adding. So as we go in the timeline to sustainability, we will see that we have gone on adding more and more parts to what we consider as sustainable. Right? So I'll just share a different screen. So this is a timeline of the evolution of the design process, which I put it on a similar timeline, but it's not exactly the same. Are you able to see the whole slide?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I've just minimized this part. Yeah, so see, again, I'm trying to just summarize the whole different approaches to design on a timeline, similar to the one I showed for the sustainability discussion and debate timeline. This is a little bit more detailed than that one. And this is slightly different from the one you have in your lecture notes. It's not entirely different. The one in your lecture notes is from this research paper, actually, the evolution of design approaches. And I highly recommend that. If you feel like you are a little bit in doubt about the lecture notes or anything, please read the original research paper from where most of the content has been taken for this particular week. And that lecture, that research paper itself, don't get afraid that it's a research paper or something. It's actually fairly well explained in that paper. So that chart is from that paper, and that paper, what they've done is taken the timeline for, sorry, is anybody speaking? Was anybody asking me something? I heard. Okay, so I'm just muting everyone for now because I was getting some disturbance. If you want to speak, you can still unmute yourself or type in the chat. So this puts a little bit of, things in perspective. Like what I was saying, that firstly, all the design approaches developed in parallel. Like it's not as if one approach developed first and then the second and then the third and then the fourth. It wasn't like that. Different developments were happening for different approaches all at the same time. And they all developed from different sources. So their inspiration, their approaches, the originality of their ideas is definitely there. They all came from different angles, different perspectives. And I'm not saying anybody copied from each other. I'm just saying that they were all these things were happening in different parts of the world with different people, different organizations at the same, more or less the same timeline. So the first time the word cradle to cradle was used was in the 70s, right? And in 1980s, you had the beginnings of green design. You started talking about green design. And around the same time, in 1982, the word biomimicry was formally used. Biomimicry itself existed since way before the 80s, maybe 50s or something. Biomimicry was already being used, but they were not calling it as biomimicry. One of the examples I will take for biomimicry, it's a very good example, actually was developed in the 40s and 50s, but they weren't calling it as biomimicry design per se. But the idea was exactly that. The word itself appeared in 1982. Similarly, you see Ecodesign started getting formalized in 89 and 90. So they are all sort of, within a few years, they were all coming up with these ideas, right? Then green design was formally published by the Design Council in UK as a design approach in 1991. And now, in 1995, McDonough Braungart Design Chemistry was founded, which is the original organization which started talking about cradle to cradle design. Right? Cradle to cradle design was formally used by MBDC since 90s, and then they started formally using it since 95. But they were doing it even before 95. 95 was just when they formed the organization together. Then they published their book in 2002, which is Cradle to Cradle, we making the way we make things. That's when the book was published, but they were using that principle since way before that. For almost 10 years or something, they were already using that principle. Similarly, around the same time, you have the new book, Emotionally Durable Design, coming out in 2005. And in the same year, the MBDC launched their Cradle to Cradle Certified Products Program. So you see a lot of things are happening around the same time. In 2006, you had the first kind of proper definition for PSS design, right? And in 2016, you had some formal research paper on biomimicry design. So you can add a whole lot of bunch of things more to this. I just picked some of the most relevant developments in the world of design to share with you. So you can see that a lot of these approaches happened and developed over a period of years, maybe decades. It didn't happen overnight, firstly. Secondly, they were happening and developing their own principles in parallel in other different parts of the world, different philosophies, all aimed towards more or less the same thing. And thirdly, like this chart may look slightly different from what you have in the research paper, mainly because what I have picked is the landmark developments in the fields. But in the research paper, what they have talked about is the first mention of the word in some sort of a publication. So their yardstick is slightly different. What they are representing is slightly different from what I'm representing in the slides. But like the ideas are the same. So if you have to pick one, you can stick with the one which is there in your lecture notes. But this will at least give you a slightly better idea of how things developed over a period of time. Right. So any questions on this so far? If not, I will continue. Can I continue?
Yes.
Okay. So I will come back to the questions. I think these questions will kind of be a bit clearer once I go over some of the examples. So in some part of today's lecture, I didn't want it to be just me talking. I just wanted to show you guys some examples, some interesting examples of each type of design approach. I don't want to, and if you have some questions, or I can explain a little bit through the examples. But I just wanted to make it a bit more interesting. And the question papers I'll share with you in that same folder, which I have shared the link. Please bookmark it and save it, because I don't know why NPTEL team is not sending it to you. So maybe after the lecture, you can go back to the folder and check. I'll upload everything. So, okay, so I'll share some examples of different types of design approaches. Okay, so we're talking about green design here. First, let's start with green design, because it is one of the oldest design principles. This is sort of what you already know, that it starts to shift towards recyclable materials and all that. But this is something, this logo is something everybody would have seen. I think this was like the most, it was like suddenly it was everywhere. All the packaging, all the other things, any of the products, even today, you will see this particular logo. It's a very, very, it's a very common logo. So this logo, reduce, reuse, recycle, was one of the most, catchy trends in the 80s and 90s and even 2000s. And this was sort of the bedrock of green design. So I hope everybody has seen this logo somewhere. I'm not the only one. Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you for confirming. So this is like an interesting example I found of green design. It's not like design, but sort of like following the same kind of. You can actually see this type of a thing in many places. It started this type of an idea of using, say, old plastic bottles, cans, buckets, all of these things as planters, for example. It started in the 90s, if I'm not wrong. And then these ideas caught on, and more people started using it. So this is like one such idea. It's, in a way, you have created a new product out of an existing product, right? Okay, this is another example which you might have seen somewhere. So I've tried to pick type of examples which I thought you guys might be more familiar with. You've just not thought of it from this particular lens. So these are some street lights with solar panels. So, sorry, is anybody saying anything? I was just getting some sound. Yeah. So this is like an example where you have solar powered street lights, and these are actually very common in China. I don't know if you've seen anything in China, but these are very, very common in China. And now, of course, because India has also started moving a lot towards solar in the last 10, 20 years, you can see these in some states in India as well. But these are now becoming more and more common. So this is sort of like an idea which uses green design principles. And you can think of it in other types of design principles also, because like I said, in the end, the product is anyway sustainable. And we don't actually have contact with the person who created the product to know what principle it is. But this is sort of like green design approach to product design. This one we've discussed I think in the class also a little bit. These are like shoes which are made of recycled ocean plastic. And it's not just that, they just picked up the plastic and made shoes out of it. So it's a very interesting, very interesting sort of approach they have used to creating new product out of discarded waste. And not just like you pick up, like you saw the first one which I showed you was a planter, right? In that, they literally just take the same plastic can or bottle and they just make a planter out of it. But in this one, you are actually creating something more than just, reusing that same item. So what they've done is they collect all this trash on the left, which you can see. So this is the trash. They collect it, then they pick the plastic out of this. Okay. Sorry, I'm writing with the mouse, it's not very helpful. Then they make these sort of pellets out of it. Okay. And then they spin it into a yarn. So you see, they created an entire new manufacturing process, a new material itself for making shoes, which is very different from just reusing, recycling, all that, right? Okay, so let me just share a video here with you. I think it will be a little bit more interesting than me talking. Hang on, let me just open this. You can also check the website of Adidas Parley and just let me, because they have actually explained this whole process which I was trying to talk about. They've actually explained this in much better detail than what I can probably explain. So I'll play this video and let me know if you can hear the sound.
Our oceans are the big.
Can you hear? Are you getting the sound?
Yes.
Breathing heart of the planet. How do we save them? End plastic waste. For over 5 years, Adidas and Parley have led the fight to protect the oceans.
There is a huge demand for products that protect the environment instead of destroying them.
To make shoes that include plastic waste. To inspire a new generation to take action.
We are running for the ocean!
Today, Adidas and Parley are on a mission to go even further.
Let's do this together.
For the oceans, for the mountains, for our cities. Because plastic waste is an ocean problem, and a mountain, forest, desert can't wait for tomorrow problem. And through sport, we are the solution to help end plastic waste.
So it's a very short video. I just wanted you to have an idea of the whole movement they're trying to create with these shoes, which are more than just, reusing plastic. Because a lot of times people think that, oh, it's fine, everybody's reusing plastic. What are they doing different? But they've actually, created a whole new manufacturing process. They've done a lot of campaigns. So they have actually created a lot of, marathons across the world in which they have this like logo, right? Run for the oceans and like that. And they have kind of tried to bring people together to not just to sort of buy the shoes, but also to collect plastic. So they've tried to, alter behavior also in some ways as a part of the product itself. So, like the product itself doesn't do that. Like the product itself is just a product. So you can't actually call it a product service system in that sense. But they have tried to combine a whole lot of other things with it, where they try to run it like through their app and things. They try to run different runs and completing certain number of kilometers and things like that. I have these shoes. I bought them like 5 years ago. So this design has been around for a long time. Now I think it's becoming more and more popular. So I still want to put it only in the green design bucket, because it's not like, the approach they have used is still not like that holistic as what you would, or as, thorough you can say, as what you would use in Ecodesign or in Cradle to Cradle design. Because the original shoes now, in most of their other shoes also, they have started using a lot of recycled plastic. So if you see, not just in Adidas and many other brands, you'll see like a lot of the shoes in the market in general are starting to move towards using more and more recycled plastics. You'll see it written that 30% of the materials used in this, making this shoe, come from recycled plastic. So, 40% or 50%, whatever. So you'll see a lot of the shoes in the market in general these days have started to have this kind of a shift towards using recycled plastic, but it is still not 100%. It is still not 100%. So if it were cradle to cradle design, it would be very different approach. Because in this, we are still not, we're still using plastic. We're still not even using 100% of recycled plastic. You can't really call it as cradle to cradle design or even product eco design. Still only in the field of green design, but still like one of the more, you can say, advanced approaches to green design. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So this is another very common example you will see in some places for green design, which is this furniture from repurposed cartons. So these are cartons which have been again repurposed, recycled, etc. And they have created a sort of like a new material altogether out of it. And this is a relatively newer picture, but this whole movement itself started in the 80s, 90s by Tetra Pak. So you guys know what is Tetra Pak?
Yes, packaging industry.
Right. So you see those milk cartons and all these other beverages which come in, this fruity and all those cartons, small cartons in which you get all these beverages, right? Those are all Tetra Pak. Sorry, were you saying something? Somebody saying something? Okay. So yeah, I was just saying that, all these packaging materials, they're very old. So this design of this fruity carton and all, it's Tetra Pak is a trademark. So what we normally, when we started using Tetra Pak as a generic term, it's actually a trademark for that particular packaging product, which was developed by this company. Then it became so universal everywhere that everybody started just calling it everything as Tetra Pak. Tetra Pak is that metal foil lining inside and paper outside, cardboard outside, that kind of packaging. So because Tetra Pak was one of the first companies to come under fire for using non-sustainable materials and things like that. So they started moving towards making build structures and furniture out of these repurposed cartons. So the cartons which people throw away, the Tetra Pak, they don't serve any purpose after you finish the beverage. So people throw, I mean, they always throw those away. Nobody preserves those cartons. So they collected all those cartons which were thrown out as waste. And then they created a whole new process to create different material altogether out of those cartons. And then they created this. I've put a picture of only the furniture, but they've actually created some bus stand and things like that with that material which they made from the repurposed cartons. So this is another very interesting example, a slightly more advanced example of green design. Because again, you're still using Tetra Pak, you're still using the same kind of materials in Tetra Pak. So you can't really call it as Ecodesign or even Cradle to Cradle. But they just started putting those materials to a different use also. That's all. So now if I come to product eco-design, so the main difference between this and green design is that, we started using a very, very, very popular method which is used in environmental sciences called life cycle assessment. So the main approach to product eco-design over and above everything else you will read is the incorporation of life cycle assessment methods within the design framework. So life cycle assessment, does anybody know what's life cycle assessment? Any idea?
No.
Okay. Rajendra, have you heard of life cycle assessment? I'm guessing no. Okay, so let me explain life cycle assessment. Okay, so I've just made a conceptual sketch. It's not literal. So suppose this, this yellow bar, yellow thing is your product, right? These are your materials. These are your processes, and these are now. These are your inputs. Okay, and these are your outputs. Say the green arrows are outputs. Blue arrows are emissions. Okay, so this is how you can conceptually represent any product, and what happens to say the product in its entire life cycle. So like doing something called as referring to the life cycle of the product. Right? Life cycle is an important concept to understand. If you understand life cycle, you will easily understand life cycle design also. Right now, what we're talking about is life cycle assessment. So life cycle assessment is a very, very popular, very, very common method for evaluating the environmental impact of any item, anything. It can be a product for our, for our special case, we can talk about products. And generally we do talk about products, but it can be actually anything, any item. So its basic, premise is, say, there is some inputs and some manufacturing processes, for example, which give you a product. And then product is used in its whole life cycle, and you have, from the product, you have some outputs and some emissions and waste. Right? So you define a functional unit. For example, like you are talking about one phone, right? One phone. So we're defining one phone as the functional unit. Okay, that is, we call it as the functional unit. I mean, it's just capital U. Oops. Okay. F and capital U, that's just the symbol used for it. Now, how do we go about defining the environmental impact of a product? It's infinite, right? You can't really say where its impact begins and where it ends. That's the basic quandary. That's the basic dilemma we all have. Like, yeah, we all want to measure the impact of a product, but to what extent? How much do we measure? Right? So, in answer to that problem itself, this method gives you the freedom, so to say, of defining, what, how, to what extent do you want to measure the impact of a product. So, suppose I define this as the boundary. Okay, this is like what we call as the system boundary. Okay, is this making some sense? I'm trying to explain it graphically because it's very difficult to explain without a diagram. Is it making sense?
Yes.
Okay. So for what we do in a life cycle assessment, I'm talking about life cycle assessment of any item. Special case we take is the product. We define what we are referring to as one functional unit. For example, we take one iPhone, right? How much are the emissions per iPhone? How much are the is the water used per iPhone? How much is the land used per iPhone? We define certain metrics. There are several metrics which you can use to define the environmental impact of that item. And we define the system boundary. System boundary is two. One is geographically or spatially. Second is temporally, or like, in a timeline. So from what time to what time of that product are we considering, and to what extent are we considering? Like, are we talking about only like that product itself? Are we talking about, the items used in it, or are we talking about the items used for making the items used in it? To what extent are we going to measure the impact? That is the system boundary. When we have defined the system boundary, like, the system boundary contains the processes and the inputs which are used for the product. So once you've defined the system boundary, what we do is we measure the environmental impact of all the processes used for creating the product and all the inputs, meaning all materials, everything which goes inside the product, all of those used, and then all the outputs of the products. For example, like, there may, for some products, there may be some other outputs also, like some side products, something byproducts, and the emissions and waste. So emissions and waste are what we don't want. Outputs we may or may not want. So we take the positive, negative, everything, and we put everything together in the balance on that spatio timeline. And then we try to measure the overall environmental impact of that product. That is called life cycle assessment. So is that making any sense, what I just explained?
Yes. Just one question. The processes that are there, don't they include the inputs as well? Like, are the processes and inputs different?
Yes. So inputs and processes are different because, for example, like maybe you're using metal, right, in some product. The metal by itself may not be harmful. You're using maybe steel or maybe something else. Steel is a recyclable material. Maybe you're using gold, right? They're not harmful materials by themselves. You're understanding that the material itself may or may not be harmful. Like you're using, say, steel, or you're using gold, you're using something else. The material may not be toxic or may not be hazardous, but the manufacturing process which you are using to sort of to incorporate that material in your product may be giving out some emissions, maybe using some other energy sources of energy, or maybe very energy intensive. So that process itself is also important, not just the inputs. Is that clear?
Yes. So inputs, you like they mean materials.
Materials, yes. Mostly you can call it as materials. Like I'm not going to go on the secondary level. For example, like, in some products, you may be using some other products itself as inputs, right? Then it becomes a bit multi-tier thing. It's a complex methodology then. I'm not going into that. But let's go with a very simple product, like if you're making a pencil, a simple pencil, right? You're using lead, you're using some wood, you're using some paint, you're using some other maybe things like an eraser or a rubber or some sort of a thing. Just give me a moment. Let me get a pencil. I don't have. Okay. Suppose this is a pencil, right? It's actually a recycled material pencil. But say you have all these items used in this. Now it's actually a good example, because in this pencil they have used recycled cloth outside instead of the usual wood, and inside also this is some material made of recycled materials. It's not usual wood. I don't know if the lead is different, but these materials are different. So you see, in a very simple product like a pencil also, there are many things you can change. It's very interesting actually. So if you do life cycle assessment of this pencil versus the usual wooden pencil which you see in the market, there will be two different assessments. Because in this, even on the timeline, for example, origin of the product and its materials and the life cycle, like once this pencil kind of decays, it's going to leave lesser of toxic materials or harmful materials in the environment. Plus, you're sourcing it from materials which are already recycled. So that impact is already zero. We're not cutting down trees to make this pencil, right? So even in this most simple level, you can understand that there is a certain manufacturing process used to make this pencil. Now, apart from the materials alone, once you change the materials, processes also have to change. That's another thing. So your question is actually a very good question, because it's not like you have a petrol ki car and usi mein CNG laga diya, right? You have to change the whole wiring, you have to change the whole machinery. You have to change many things for changing even one input sometimes, right? It's not like you can put diesel in a petrol car or you can put natural gas in a diesel car. You can't do that, okay? Because the process has to be changed. So that's why I think your question was very pertinent, that processes and inputs both are very, very relevant. Similarly, outputs and emissions also both are very relevant. For example, like in some products, some processes, it is possible that you're actually sequestering carbon, for example, or you are creating some other product as a way. It may be a side product or a byproduct of that product manufacturing process, which is also useful for the environment, right? Like for example, when you create biogas, you know how biogas is created? Is anyone familiar with biogas? Even a little bit?
Methane.
No, so okay, I'll explain. So biogas, just for a very brief understanding, they take human waste, animal waste, agricultural waste, residual agricultural residue, all kinds of green waste, green as in plant waste, leaves, wood, all that, whatever is waste. And there's a biogas digester. You put some microbes, something in it, and you put some water in it, and they undergo anaerobic digestion. So decently big apparatus. And as a part of the anaerobic digestion, you put animal dung in it. So all these things combined, when they undergo anaerobic digestion, they give out biogas, which is a fuel. Then you purify that biogas and you compress that biogas. It's I've forgotten the correct name for it, but it's compressed natural gas type of a thing, similar to CNG. And it can be used for anything for which you use CNG. It can be used to run vehicles. It's being used in a lot of Europe to run vehicles. And it's coming completely from waste. Or you can use it for even powering up an electric, power plant. So for manufacturing electricity, you need some energy, right? Some power. So you can use biogas as that source of energy instead of your hydrothermal, whatever. It can be used as general source of energy. For cooking, you can of course use it. So biogas itself is a product, but as a part of its manufacturing process, you also get biofertilizer. So you get biogas as a part of the manufacturing process, but also you get biofertilizer, which is like the sludge you get from the what do you call that? From the biogas digester, you get a sludge. That sludge, when you treat it a little bit, you mix it with some soil and all that, it can be fine-tuned to like specific nutrient requirements of different crops, and people use it as fertilizer in the crops. That's what organic farming is actually. So that biofertilizer is actually, you're getting an extra product from waste, and that biofertilizer actually helps sequester carbon. So you're lowering down the environmental footprint a lot in this process. I'm just giving you an example of a product in which you can have a side product or a byproduct which is good for the environment and which is an output apart from whatever else you get. So there's no real waste in this process, in the biogas creation manufacturing process. There's no real emissions or other waste, because the waste itself is that fertilizer. I mean, I'm giving you a positive example as a counter example, but most products don't have this kind of method. Like they don't have that kind of ethos in their process. So normal products will have some emissions, some waste from these processes, some kind of other maybe outputs which are not desirable, like maybe some toxic thing or maybe something else, which, for example, cannot be recycled or anything. So this whole methodology is for life cycle assessment. Is it clearer now what I was talking about?
Yes.
So this life cycle assessment can be cradle to cradle. That's the best form of assessment. Or it can be cradle to grave, or it can be or it can be cradle to gate, or there are other variations, but these are the three most common timelines. These are the three most common timelines. Cradle to cradle, you understand from the birth of the product to the birth of the next product. It is refashioned. Cradle to grave is from the beginning of the product to its end. You don't consider what happens after that. Cradle to gate is just, you manufacture the product and you deliver it at the doorstep of the user. That's all. There is another one which is, I think, more common in agriculture, farm to gate. So, you're growing something and you manufacture, like you're growing some crop or livestock or meat or whatever. And then you process it, you package it or whatever, and you deliver it to the user. That's it. So that is the timeline you're considering. So, I mean, I'm not saying one is better, one is bad or something. You obviously understand by now that cradle to cradle is the most holistic approach in all of these timelines. And cradle to cradle is what is used in, cradle to cradle design philosophy. But like I said, it's only one of the approaches, which is why Ecodesign and cradle to cradle have a lot in common. But still, it's not entirely the same thing. So this is, I'm still talking about life cycle assessment. I haven't as yet jumped back into what we were initially talking about. So is this clear? Yes. This is sort of almost out of syllabus for you guys. But since you don't know what is life cycle assessment, I thought I'll explain it. It might be useful later. So I'll share all these, doodles from the class also. Yeah. Yes, Rajendra, you're saying something?
Ma'am, how will you calculate the impact of this means every stage of that product on environment or on flow? Means what is the parameter for that assessment of that impact?
I talked at the time when I was explaining this. So,
Ma'am, your voice is means generating echo, ma'am.
yeah, is this better?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So, what I was explaining was that I'm talking from two accounts. That's why you're getting an echo. Right? That like you can define the metrics, or you can also use some of the existing metrics like water footprint, carbon footprint, land footprint. There are many multiple indices are already there, which you can use to define the environmental impact of any item in the world.
Okay.
So you define the spatio temporal limit of the system boundary. You define one functional unit, and then you define the system boundary. System boundary is both spatially as well as on a timeline. So what is the timeline you're considering, which I just explained, cradle to cradle or farm to gate, whatever. Spatially, you have to define like what extent, like, are you just taking the input materials, or are you taking the manufacturing process of the input materials also, or what, right? To what tier, to what level of hierarchy are you considering?
Okay.
Product. Then you define, once you've defined that, it's very simple. You break it down into all the different components, all the inputs, all the processes, everything. You measure the environmental impact of each of them and the outputs, and like you summarize it, add and minus everything, whatever, and then you get one final output. It's actually a topic on its own, so I can't explain it beyond a certain point. Otherwise, I'll have to
Okay.
ask for it.
Okay,
But I just wanted to give you an idea of what we actually do in life cycle assessment. I think it will become clearer once we go into life cycle product design in more detail. I think that's next week. But this is maybe a little bit of a preview for that. So this is what we are studying is life cycle design, and life cycle design is based on this life cycle assessment, philosophy. Okay.
Okay.
Clear? Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is like your usual spider diagram, which I just wanted to show for reference, which also you can use to characterize how sustainable co-design is. It's not very different from what we discussed earlier. We come to biomimicry design because I think I don't want to take up too much time on LCA. I think I've explained it more than I intended. Yes. I don't mind, of course, it's better if you understand it. But biomimicry is something very interesting which I wanted to discuss. So, do you guys understand what is biomimicry design by now? Can someone explain what is biomimicry design?
It is mimicking the forms, processes, or life cycle of the natural world and incorporating it in our products, services, etc.
All right, that's one way to explain it. Can you specify in what way we are trying to emulate the natural world?
In what way, as in forms or processes?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you think. If I tell you that, then I'm giving away the answer.
No, yeah, so in forms or processes, or the entire way that the natural world works. For example, if there's a seed planted, so it will grow into a tree. The tree, when it sheds its leaves, it becomes compost, and another seed can grow into that soil. Like it decomposes, and then it's a good soil, and so that is why the life cycle, basically we can mimic that, or the forms that we have. For example,
that's what I wanted to clarify. Biomimicry design is not all of that, right? So this is the difference between the three. I think I mentioned it briefly in the previous class also. Now, all these three, I think I forgot to put it in the slide. All these three together are called biomimetics. Biomimetics is what you are explaining, actually. Biomimicry is one part of biomimetics. Let me add it. It might not know how it is spelled. Good thing I asked the question, because this is the question, this is the confusion I think people are generally bound to. So, right. So now you know the word. I just wanted to put the word on the slide. So what you're explaining is actually biomimetics. Biomimetics includes three types of, inspirations from nature. Biomimicry is one where you function like nature. Biomorphism is when it looks like nature. Bioutilization is where it uses more and more materials, items from nature. I'll just go right into it. First example which I wanted to discuss is Velcro. So Velcro is the one I was talking about, when I was giving the overview, that it's like actually it was developed in 1941. The poor guy got a patent only in 1951. and the patent was granted to him only in 1955. So for almost for like 14 years, 15 years, he created this product and it didn't even have like a whole lot of relevance in the market. And in 1960s, with a lot of his effort and maybe some final grace, NASA recognized the value of Velcro, and it started getting used by NASA astronauts, and then from there it started getting used in so many places. And now you see, like, even in your laptop cable it has Velcro, or even your earphones, you will see a small that Velcro cable in it. So I don't know if you can see this. Are you able to see this? Little
Yes.
Velcro? So this is like as universal as that. Most of the cables you get these days, your earphones, your Type-C cable, laptop cable, even they have this little Velcro thing. It's like the simplest possible way of tying something together. It's like one side is this serrated kind of edge, and the other side is this thing, furry kind of an edge. It's literally furry, right? And you put one on top of the other and it sticks. Now it looks furry because it actually is from nature, this design. So birds, I don't think we have those in India, but it's a kind of a tree or a plant. And it has these kind of this sort of thing, sort of like fur, almost like fur, sticks out. And this guy, George de Mestral, he was kind of a very observant, and he saw that when he went on trek or something, his dog's hair was filled with these burrs. And then it suddenly dawned on him that if it is sticking to that, maybe it can stick to anything. And then he came up with this material and this item, which you can see the picture on the right and zoomed in picture of a Velcro. And then, of course, the rest is history. So I'll just maybe I'll just show you the video for this. I think it will be more interesting than me talking. So a very short video on Velcro, how it was developed and how rough that process was, but it also helps you understand how old this product is. It's not really like new thing or something.
So does this come under biomimicry or biomorphism, or both?
In this case, it will be both, but the philosophy is more of biomimicry. Okay. Like you're correct, it is biomorphism also, because in this particular case, it actually also looks like nature. But what he was trying to mimic was the way it's functioning, it is sticking together like that. So he was trying to incorporate that principle, because he's not using anything which is trying to look like the tree per se. But yes, to some extent, it does look like that, the birds or whatever thing which inspired him to create this. It's both in this special case. Yeah. Can hear the sound, right?
Yes.
In 1941, Swiss engineer George de Mestral decided to take his dog for a nature hike. The man and his faithful companion both returned home covered with burrs that kept sticking to his clothes and his dog's fur. With a burning curiosity, he ran to his microscope and inspected one of the many burrs stuck to his pants. He noted the 100 of hooks that caught on anything with a loop, such as clothing, animal fur, or even hair. With this, he saw the possibility of binding two materials reversibly in a simple fashion, if he could figure out how to duplicate the hooks and the loops. Mechanizing the process of weaving the hooks took 8 years, and it took another year to create the loom that trimmed the loops after weaving them. In all, it took 10 years to create a mechanized process that worked. He submitted his idea for patent in Switzerland in 1951, and the patent was granted in 1955. Velcro got its first break when it was used in the aerospace industry to help astronauts maneuver in and out of their bulky spacesuits.
a very brief video. From there, we will go to the next example of biomimicry. I think this might be a better example, even better than Velcro. This is an example of Shinkansen in Japan. Shinkansen is these bullet trains which travel in Japan. They are very world famous now. I mean, everybody knows about Shinkansen. But when they were first, releasing Shinkansen, they had a bit of a problem there. It was creating a very loud sound every time it emerged from the tunnel. And to solve this problem, because it was traveling at very high speed, they were kind of, a bit curious about how can we actually solve this problem. When one of the main engineers, who was a bird lover, actually observed, he used to observe a lot of birds. So it's there in the video, so I don't want to repeat it. But he basically took the inspiration for this long nose design of Shinkansen from the Kingfisher. So this is a very good example of biomimicry design, maybe because you see, in this case, it is not biomorphism. Like you were saying, like you're correctly pointing out that in Velcro, to some extent, you can say it's biomorphism also, because it's sort of looking like the birds, right? But in this case, it is not like, so to say, looking like the Kingfisher beak like that, but it is kind of functionally utilizing that feature of its beak. So let me just explain this further with the video. Just give me a moment. This is actually a very interesting video. I personally like this video a lot.
Japan's Shinkansen.
There are two videos. I'm playing the first one now.
In 1980,
can you hear the video?
Yes.
Japan's Shinkansen bullet train had a problem. It was fast, really fast, like pushing 170 miles per hour fast. But every time it exited a tunnel, it was loud. The noise was coming from a variety of sources, but whenever a train sped into a tunnel, it pushed waves of atmospheric pressure through the other end. The air exited tunnels with a sonic boom that could be heard 400 meters away. In dense residential areas, that was a huge problem. So an engineering team was brought in to design a quieter, faster, and more efficient train. And they had one secret weapon. Eiji Nakatsu, the general manager of the technical development department, was a bird watcher.
Different components of the redesigned bullet train were based on different birds. Owls inspired the pantograph. That's the rig that connects the train to the electric wires above. Nakatsu modeled the redesign after their feathers, reducing noise by using the same serrations and curvature that allow them to silently swoop down to catch prey. The Adelie penguin, whose smooth body allows it to swim and slide effortlessly, inspired the pantograph's supporting shaft, redesigned for lower wind resistance. And perhaps most notable of all was the kingfisher.
The kingfisher is a bird that dives into water to catch its prey. The unique shape of its beak allows it to do that while barely making a splash. Nakatsu took that shape to the design table. The team shot bullets shaped like different train nose models down a pipe to measure pressure waves and dropped them into water to measure the splash size. The quietest nose design was the one modeled most closely after the kingfisher's beak. When the redesign debuted in 1997, it was 10% faster, used 15% less electricity, and stayed under the 70 decibel noise limit in residential areas. And it did all that with the wings of an owl, the belly of a penguin, and the nose of a kingfisher. There's a name for design like this. It's called biomimicry.
the people who design our world usually never take a biology class, believe it or not. So they're novices in how the world works.
That's Janine Benyus. Back in 1997, she wrote the book that coined the term biomimicry. It told the story of the innovations in computing, energy, and health that were inspired by structures in the natural world.
Stick like a gecko, compute like a cell, even run a business like a redwood forest.
Benyus has since worked as a consultant for various companies, trying to get them to understand how to take design ideas from nature. That might mean studying prairie dog burrows to build better air ventilation systems, mimicking shark skin to create bacteria-resistant plastic surfaces for hospitals, or arranging wind turbines in the same drag-reducing pattern that schools of fish swim in. Designers get inspiration from a lot of different places, but Benyus thinks many of them could benefit from looking more at the natural world.
Share the links for all these videos. You can watch the whole video at your own time. Like it. I thought it was a really good video for just explaining the philosophy of biomimicry and how it is used in product design. So is this interesting, by the way? Is this format interesting to you, or is this boring?
Very interesting.
So, like I'm just trying to make you understand, the whole idea and the philosophy behind all these type of products, and how, there are like subtle differences between all these different processes, but they are, there are differences. So when you get into it in more examples of the different products, I think it becomes a little bit clearer. So I think we have like maybe 10 minutes left. So I'll just go over some of the questions which are there in the practice problem set. And so here, like now question 4, I think will not be too difficult for you. What are the key differences between green design and eco design? Anybody wants to take a shot? Quickly in the chat, can you just type the answer? Question 4. Siddhi has answered. Is Rajendra still there? Yeah. Rajendra, do you want to type in your answer in the chat box for question 4? I don't know if he's listening, but so yes, A is the correct answer, because I mean, although there are many overlaps, like I was saying, the other 3 are not really correct in that sense. Because eco design also kind of includes recycled products. It also includes usage of more sustainable materials. But green design is sort of like a part by part kind of approach, whereas eco design is a more holistic approach. And since only Sylvie is answering, I think biomimicry design methodology, I think you should be able to answer now, since that is exactly the question I took up. So we've not discussed emotionally durable design. We'll come back to that. This is a question 7, in which you can refer to this acacia-like tree. It harvests solar energy while it at the same time giving shelter to people who can sit, like, you can see this is the top view. They can sit on benches under these tree-like structures. So which type of design would you think this is going to be?
Should I put it in the chat box or?
Sorry?
Should I put it in the chat box? Okay.
Yeah. Right. So this is biomimicry design. We were just discussing this. This is a good example of biomimicry design. And let's go back to this emotionally durable design thing. So yeah, so question 6. So why do you think emotionally durable design is considered to be a sustainable methodology for design? What do we do in design for a emotionally durable design? What do we do in that? What we're trying to do is we're essentially trying to make products which people like to cherish, right? Like you have antique furniture, or you have some valuables, or you have some limited edition products, things like that, right? Collectibles, right? There are many such products which are kind of a bit unique, or they're either customizable, or they are very high value. So people kind of form attachments and bonds to those products, and they value them, so they never throw them away. So they never really go into the dump, so to say, right? They are always used from one generation to other. They're kind of passed on as heirlooms many times, right? So some furniture is like that, where people like to keep the furniture. Oh, this is from the from my great grandfather's chair or something like that. So okay, so he has answered. That is emotionally durable design. What it does is, she's answered A and D. Yes, that's the correct answer. It basically makes the product life longer, and that is why it is more sustainable. And because sometimes it's enabling the user to personalize it, to customize it. So it is also becoming more valuable to the consumer for that reason, and hence they are not kind of throwing it out into the dump, right? There's one last very short part left, which I will cover just a few minutes. It's not very long. I just wanted to show these examples. So there are other things in the lecture, but I'm not going over them because they're already covered in the lecture. Just some part for design for sustainable behavior. So I'm not going into the lecture notes and all that. You already have that, so there's no reason to go into that. In this, I just wanted to show some examples, really nice examples of how they have implemented design for sustainable behavior. So see, there's a difference in this, that we're not talking about just the product itself being sustainable alone. Sometimes the product itself may not be sustainable, because that's what the consumers are habituated to using. That is what is common in the market, things like that. So maybe the product itself may not be sustainable itself, so to say.
I'm having trouble connecting to the internet. It looks like
yeah, so it may be something like that. But what they do is they encourage the behavior of people to be more sustainable. So like for this example, like you can see like Africa is becoming, sorry, not Africa, South America is becoming less and less green as you pull down more and more tissues. It's a very creative way of trying to make a point that minimize the usage, otherwise you're losing greenery, you're losing forest cover basically. So a very nice example. This is another example where this is a plastic bag. I'm not sure if this is a plastic bag, but I think it looks like a plastic bag to me. But whatever bag this is, it's a shopping bag. That much is clear. They've made the design in such a way that it literally, when you hold the bag, it literally looks like you're strangling the poor turtle. And there's a logo there which says "Plastic bags kill, keep our oceans clean." So you see, it's a very provocative design in that sense, that it makes the user as well as the people around him, everybody think like, is it really worth it? And it sort of makes you realize what plastic bags do in a very visual, very stark, very visual way. So it's a very interesting design, which kind of, nudges you. So I actually put together all these examples as a form of nudges. They're called, nudge is a principle in behavioral sciences, in behavioral economics as well. And this is an example of a nudge where you're not like forcing the person, the users, to change their behavior or something. Just giving them gentle nudges, which makes them themselves think about how sustainable their habits, their lifestyles are. And this is the last one. It's again a very cool example, I think, in which these are basically cigarette disposal, containers, sort of like trash bags only, but not exactly trash bag, but they've just made these containers on the street side. And I think this is in the UK. And they've asked who will win. This is a cricket match. Who will win the, I can't read thing because they have this thing. Yeah, who will win the 5th test at the Oval? It's, I think, test cricket. And if you want to, if you think it's England, put it in this box. If you think it's Australia, put it in the other box. And litter is in our hands. Let's spice up and win it. So basically what they're trying to do is, I mean, it's just a way in which you're trying to make people throw their cigarette butts in those containers rather than all over the street or in the usual dustbin or whatever, because you're not supposed to throw the cigarette butts along with other trash. It's toxic. So they are just trying to make it more like a poll where you're trying to encourage more and more people to throw cigarettes into that particular container rather than all over the place. And it's just a way of encouraging people to use that particular method of disposal rather than unsustainable. So I think with that, we come to the close for today's lecture. I will share the handouts with you guys anyway. There's all the stuff I showed is in the handouts. And I will upload all of that in that same Google folder. So if you, I don't know if Rajendra has got that. Just put the message again. Please bookmark this Google Drive folder, and I shared the YouTube link of the previous PA lesson as well. You can see on the same channel, I'll be uploading today's video as well. So you can check both. And any other questions? Otherwise, I can close this. I will upload today's practice questions in the same folder. You can attempt them. I will upload the solutions also by tomorrow or something.
We will be discussing the first and second week's assignments next week, right?
Yes, because you still have, I think, 3-4 days left to submit the assignment.
Yeah.
So we'll discuss it right now. But hopefully this class discussions would have helped you in getting there faster with your assignments. So we'll discuss the solutions for the assignments in the next week.
Chalega works.
All right. So if that's it, then we'll close today's session here. Thank you everybody for joining, and everybody who will be watching it on YouTube later. Good evening.
Thank you.